Will the House please come back to order? In accordance with the provisions of Uniform Rule 51, I turn the gavel over to the President of the Senate, the Honorable Gary Stevens.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Will this joint session of the Alaska State Legislature please come to order? Madam Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I move and ask unanimous consent that the roll call of the Senate be waived and all members shown as present.
Thank you. Without objection, so ordered. Mr. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I move and ask unanimous consent that the roll call of the House be waived and all members be shown as present.
Thank you. Without objection, so ordered. Will Senator Gray Jackson and Representative Ruffridge please escort Senator Murkowski into the chamber, into the joint session?
Ladies and gentlemen, the U.S. Senator for the great state of Alaska, the Honorable Lisa Murkowski.
Well, good morning. Good morning. It is a beautiful morning. I was supposed to be working on my speech this morning, and I have to tell you, the sunrise coming out of Anchorage and all the way here, it's just breathtaking. And it gets your morning good knowing that we are blessed to be in the most extraordinary state in these beautiful United States. So, Mr. Speaker, look at this, I'm starting off already. Let's try this again. Mr. President, Speaker, it is so good to be with you and members of the legislature yet again. Thank you. Thank you for this hour. We're going to try to keep it to an hour, respecting your schedule, but really the privilege to be with you. It's a day later than I had intended. Sorry for that, but not much in DC is going as scheduled nowadays, so I apologize. So we're going to start off feeling good about things. Yesterday was Valentine's Day, and so I'll begin with a quick update on my Valentines, and that's my family. My son Matt is a Valentine's Day baby. What mother could ask for more than having a son who's born on Valentine's? So his update, he's growing the family pasta business there in Anchorage. He is never shy to remind me of the hardships that a small businessman like him is facing when it comes to things like eggs and flour, supply chain issues, inflation. So I get it, I hear it. Our older son, Nick, just got married just in October to a lovely woman from Tennessee, and I think she's snagged him for that part of the Southeast for maybe a few years, but it's good to see him happily married. He's working as a strong young attorney and doing well. Vern is doing well. He's got more home improvement projects than anyone would ever want, but it keeps him young. My parents who many of you in this room know, both of them celebrated their 90th birthdays last year. So they're doing fine. My father is not shy at all to express his views and opinions, and I think you hear from him occasionally. My good news this year is that I finally got a season ski pass at Alaska. It's not because I have any more time to go skiing, but you get to a certain age where you get really good discounts. So it's made it worth my while. I have some folks with me in the gallery this morning that I would like to introduce, my staff, some of my staff. You have Joe Plesha, the guy with the mustache back there. Some of you recognize him from when he was in the Alaska House serving the coalition. He is my communications director back in Washington, D.C. Grace Kubitz is there on the end. You also recognize Grace from her work with Representative Fields. She is now my Rural and Community Development Legislative Assistant. She is also my liaison for the legislature, so you can always call on Grace. Cassidy Hobbs is next to her. She is also a legislative assistant. She's returned to my office from the University of Alaska. She is leading our work on health care and mental health and doing a great job for us. Anna Powers is next to her. Some of you may remember her as Annie Dietrich. Anna got married this past year, but she's come back to my team as a professional staff on the Indian Affairs Committee. She focuses on housing and homelessness and comes to this with great passion. And then next to Joe, we have Kara Holatz. Kara is doing a fabulous job here in Juneau as my regional director. You will notice that in addition to these that I've introduced, you're going to see a lot of my staff that are here in Juneau. They're in the state this week, and they're here to hear from you, to talk to you and to your staffs, to find out what you're working on, how we can do a better job in helping you. So if you would like to set up any scheduled times, please work through Grace, and we will come and find you. So in keeping with this theme of Valentine's, I'm going to offer some professional Valentines to hand out for some of the things that you have done that I appreciate that you have done over the past year. And I first want to start with President Stevens, our legislature's best playwright. I went to see his play. I hope many of you did. We saw Uncle Ted at Cyrano's there in Anchorage. It was just a great tribute to a great man. I don't know where you find the time to do it, Gary, but thank you. It was a treat to all of us, and I appreciate that. The next Valentine is for Senator Giesel up front here, Representative Sadler next to her, Representative Johnson. He came in with me. I'm going to have a hard time finding all my Valentines to throw out here. But thank you. Thank you for coming back. Thank you for returning to do good work in the legislature. I appreciate that. And then to the freshman class. The largest in 20 years. That's pretty awesome. Thank you for your genuine focus on bipartisanship. I want to acknowledge Representative Gray for helping set that tone. These are good initiatives. To Senator Bjorkman and Representative Sumner, thank you for your lumber grading bill. Little thing, big difference, right? It's appreciated. And Representative McCabe, thank you for your focus on the Alaska Railroad. President Stevens, Speaker Tilton, thank you for tabbing energy as a priority. We all know that we have to focus on this. We don't need any more reminder than the impacts of those sub-zero temperatures that we recently had across the state. Now the reality is I could probably find good reason to credit almost everybody in this room for something that you have done over this year. And on that note, I want to thank all of you for unanimously passing a resolution in support of the Willow Project. That Willow resolution helped us, so thank you. Representative Baker's resolution opposing BLM's rule to lock down our petroleum reserve, which may be the most damaging of the dozens of actions that the Biden administration has taken against Alaska, will help us. Senator Dunbar's resolution supporting my legislation to amend ANCSA to free up lands in Native communities helps us. So thank you for weighing in. Thank you. Keep these resolutions, especially the unanimous ones, coming to us. There are also individuals beyond the legislature who deserve our thanks. And among them, I want to single out Dr. Ann Zink. She is stepping down from her role as Alaska's Chief Medical Officer, but I thank her for her years of leadership and for saving lives across our state during the pandemic. She's done a great job for the state of Alaska. Now, I also want to take a moment to recognize my partners in the delegation, Dan and Mary. Now, you're going to be hearing from them. I don't know exactly what they will say in their address to you, but what I hope you'll hear is how hard they work, how deeply they care, and how well we all work together. A good example is fisheries. You know the Treasury Department is finally closing loopholes in U.S. sanctions that allow Russia to dump its overharvested seafood into our markets. Well, Treasury's announcement, we know, is unequivocally good for us at a time when, in fairness, so much is unequivocally bad for our fisheries. But know that this just didn't happen. Dan led the delegation charge. He pushed for months until that announcement was made. And Mary helped push that with the administration. She's also working tirelessly to educate her House colleagues about issues like fisheries and resources in Alaska. She may be one of 435, but she stands out, and she too is making a difference for Alaska. I think we recognize that fisheries are hard and only getting harder. But when you step back and you look at things, there is a lot going well in our state right now. Willow and Pika, both on track. And that's not just great for TAPS, but it's great for the hardworking Alaskans, our economy, and our budget. Graphite 1 has received a major award from the Department of Defense as it seeks to develop North America's largest deposit of natural graphite. Tourism is back to pre-pandemic levels. And then there are investments in infrastructure. More than $7.2 billion has been announced for Alaska under our bipartisan infrastructure law, the most per capita in the United States. So we talk about broadband, but nearly $2 billion is headed our way for broadband as we seek to connect every community to high-speed internet. We've secured 10% of national funding for ports and harbors, benefiting communities like Anchorage, like Adak, Cordova, Nome, Yakutat. A total of $416 million and counting for our Alaska Marine Highway System. Yes, hey. Louise and I, we're always pulling for the Alaska Marine Highway System. Our rail belt utilities will receive $216 million from the Department of Energy to modernize South Central's electric grid. This GRIP grant is really key to our energy future moving forward. Beyond infrastructure, I've secured $170 million to begin the long overdue cleanup of ANCSA contaminated lands. That's going to make a difference for us. At the request of Alaska communities, I've now funded more than 200 projects through our congressionally directed spending process. This is everything from nursing education at UAA to the renovation of the emergency room at Alaska Native Medical Center to the expansion of Fairbanks Senior Center and housing for Alaska State Troopers. So CDS requests come from the communities. They are community priorities. We work with them to address those community needs, so thank you for that. We've been able to boost our ability to host the military through strategic investments in everything from barracks to runways to the Arctic Angels of the 11th Airborne. And this investment has really helped our construction industry through some pretty lean years while positioning Alaska perfectly for the next generation of assets and platforms. We're also putting ourselves on the map as an Arctic capital. Absolutely we should. We're building infrastructure like the Deepwater Port in Nome. We're establishing institutions like the Ted Stevens Center for Arctic Security Studies and UAA's Homeland Security Center of Excellence. And now I'm pushing to make sure that the commitments that were made to us on icebreakers are kept, and also for our Arctic ambassador, our own Dr. Mike Svrega. We need to get him confirmed as well. So there's more good news that's out on the horizon. ConocoPhillips announces that they're hiring 1,800 people this winter for the construction activities at Willow. Santos is hiring more than 2,400 on the North Slope this season. That's over 4,000 folks that we're talking about here. When was the last time, really think about it, when was the last time that we could point to numbers like that for anything in our state? So forecasts are on track to add thousands more jobs, mostly from major projects in the next few years. So just think about what this means. This is electrical workers helping to install broadband and transmission lines, engineers and construction workers building roads and repairing bridges, plumbers and pipe fitters installing water purification systems in rural villages, teamsters and truckers hauling goods and materials to the slope, longshoremen and inland boatman workers, busy thanks to a revitalized marine highway system. And all the while, tourism, mariculture, and more continue to boom. And that's all right in front of us. But also, the challenges are right in front of us, and you know about them. Everything that I have mentioned here requires workers. And we're now at 11 straight years and counting with a net loss of working age Alaskans. Quality of life is everything, but inflation has made everything cost more. High interest rates add insult to injury. We're behind on housing, we're behind on childcare, we're behind on education. I was talking in the Seattle airport yesterday with a friend from Ketchikan. He tells me that KTOO can't attract a lineman to Ketchikan. I was talking to folks from Valdez, the hospital there can't hire a nurse without housing, without childcare for the families. We're not taking good enough care of those struggling with hunger, with mental health, or homelessness. Roughly 40%, this is really discouraging and disappointing to me, but roughly 40% of the funds that I was able to secure for Alaska at the federal level to help homeless kids in school through the American Rescue Plan have not yet been spent. I mentioned earlier the unequivocally bad state of so many of our fisheries. The absence of abundance is threatening subsistence, commercial, and recreational fisheries alike. Fish racks hang empty on the Yukon and the Kuskokwim. The processing industry is seeing layoffs, undergoing a wave of consolidation. Outside groups are attempting to shut down entire fisheries, attempting to list the king salmon as endangered. So really, so much of what we thought we knew is changing. The changes in our climate threaten our food security and our economic security. So just as I worry about those who are not able to fill their freezers with fish from the river, I worry about the folks in King Cove, in False Pass, in Kodiak, and all these coastal communities that depend on fish and fish processing and the fish tax. So this is tough. I mean, these are the challenges that we have in front of us. And all of this is coming at the front end of a divisive presidential election year, with two deeply flawed candidates set to lead their party tickets, at a time when Congress is more inclined to kick the can than solve our nation's problems. We've seen that with what we did with the budget. We were able to pass all 12 of our appropriations bills out of full committee last July, had great bipartisan support. The Interior Subcommittee, which I am the ranking on, moved unanimously. I mean, we worked these appropriations bills. So far, only 3 of them have been brought up to the Senate floor since then. So we're going to have our work cut out for us to close out the FY24 budget when we return in just 10 days. That's kicking the can when you move from one CR to another CR. You know what happens. You don't have an unlimited runway here. And then the latest example of kick the can is what happened last week with border security. Republicans rightly demanded that border security be part of a national security supplemental. And then, astonishingly, refused to bring the bill to the floor for debate when presented with our best shot at reform in decades. Now, the bill was not perfect. It was not perfect. But that's what the process allows you to do. Bring it to the floor, debate it, and amendment. We could have improved our failing border policies, but instead, what we've effectively done is we've locked them in for the rest of the year and potentially well beyond that. And then globally, I cannot recall a time when so many hostilities were flaring up in so many places. It was Tuesday morning this week at 5:30 a.m., bright and shiny, or really late as it was, the Senate passed a major package with security assistance for Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan. Thank you. This is significant because it helps our allies and it sends a strong message to our enemies. And it's also crucial to reinforce our domestic defense base. But it's also months late, and it faces resistance in the House of Representatives. Now, regarding Ukraine, just setting aside for a moment our abundantly clear geopolitical interests in containing Russia, the war is being fought by Ukrainians, not Americans. And those Ukrainians are giving their very lives to try to preserve their fledgling democracy. And yet the outcome largely depends not necessarily on them, but on the help of their allies, and whether we still believe enough in our core principles, the principles that we've held since World War II, that NATO was founded on, that we do not turn our backs. We do not turn our backs on our friends when global bullies are in front of them. We do not turn our backs. But this is the moment that we're living through right now. Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, they're working together, folks. They're looking to unseat Western power. Our own southern border is in chaos. We're seeing cartels that are poisoning our people with fentanyl. Times like these require leadership that brings us together. But we're seeing anything but that in these highly partisan times. So what do? Got to stay focused. So to keep my head above water during what has been a pretty unproductive Congress so far, I'm focusing on legislative solutions for Alaska and looking for every window of opportunity that I can find. One of them that we're focusing on, and I met some folks out in the hallway that are here to talk about food and food security. So we have introduced the Improving Arctic Act, which will help strengthen Alaska's food security, seafood industry, and more. It will improve my microgrants for food security program, which has helped hundreds of Alaskans grow more food. Boost food banks in rural communities, increase local food processing capacity, establish a Denali housing fund to build and rehabilitate housing. A lot more in that. Another bill that has long been waited for by many of our coastal communities is our working waterfronts legislation. This offers a range of new opportunities and tools, from everything from tax credits for marine energy to loan guarantees for commercial fishermen and fish processors, all to help our coastal communities. We need to make our communities safer, stronger, healthier, and more resilient. And at the federal level, that can happen through legislation, but also through congressionally directed spending, appropriations more broadly, and by trying to work with the administration, regardless of who is president and the timing of the next election. So we got a lot that is in front of us coming up. Going to be good discussion with the potential for a tax bill, and I would hope to support an expansion of a child tax credit. I'm pushing to do more to address substance use disorders, including fentanyl through Bruce's Law. On the Indian Affairs Committee, we're exploring innovative solutions to address the housing deficit and overcrowding in rural Alaska. And when it comes to public safety and the tragedy of missing and murdered Indigenous women, I was proud to be able to pass 2 bills into law, and we now have the commission report and the recommendations that are required by the Not Invisible Act. So I want to thank the members of the legislature who are engaging on this with me and building partnerships across all levels of government, including with the tribes. So thank you for that. I'm also working to address natural hazards, especially in the wake of Wrangell's deadly landslide. As the people in Haines and Sitka can attest, these 100-year events are now seemingly happening every few years and taking the lives of Alaskans. Our communities need to be protected, and anxious residents need reassurance. It's going to take some time to build out the data and the forecasting, but we are underway. I've reintroduced my earthquake preparedness bill and another to reauthorize landslide monitoring, and we're going to continue to secure federal funds to directly meet those needs. So I've got a lot underway in Washington, D.C. I know that both Dan and Mary do as well. We know that not all of it's going to advance this year. It's a political year. You all get that. But our reality is Congress is kind of ground down right now, and that puts some responsibility on you. We need to work together to keep our progress going for Alaska. So here's how you can help us. You knew that I was going to come with a little bit of a list. Provide state matching funds for infrastructure projects, particularly AMHS. Louise, are you writing that one down? Okay. As well as for GRIP, for federal programs like Head Start and supplemental funding for programs like VOCA. I need your help in ensuring our infrastructure projects are built smart. So, an example with broadband, making sure that we are able to not only connect our communities with broadband, but don't forget about our defense sites, our weather observing stations. Let's make sure that this is coordinated. Make strategic state-level investments to help Alaskans compete at every level, compete for workers, compete globally and nationally. And ask yourself, I'm asking myself this all the time because I'm still trying to get one son and his new bride back to Alaska. But what can we do to keep Alaskans here, to attract those who might move here but are worried about whether or not they can afford a home or find childcare or worry about crimes or drugs or homelessness? We have to invest in our kids' education. We have to. Makes me happy when we all come together over our kids. But we do. We invest in our young people. We need to support our university. We know that only about 25% of those who leave our state for college come back home. Only 25%. But 70 to 90% of the university's graduates stay in Alaska. And under President Pitney's leadership, we've seen enrollment going up across the board. So that's good. Alaska has so much good to offer. We are resilient in so many ways. I was in Wrangell just a few weeks after that deadly landslide. Just before Christmas, I was there. And I was really reminded at that time of what sets Alaskans apart. So this community, place where I spent some growing up years, This community of 2,100 people had every reason to be discouraged. They lost a whole family, 3 kids, Tim and Beth and Mara and Kara and Derek. They lost their next-door neighbor, Otto. Otto had been described as possibly the best neighbor ever. But the community loses instantly these families. And I was there and I was talking to the city leaders, I was talking to the search and rescue team and the people who had been cut off, who lived at the end of the road. They didn't have water access and power for days at a time. And what I heard from those that were gathered was a terrible, terrible thing has hit our community. But we have one another. We're resilient. And many of them were wearing t-shirts that said, "Wrangle Strong." And it was such a reminder to me that even in the face of hard things, of some really sad and awful things, there is a strength and there is a goodness in our people. And this year, my friends, is a great year to find that strength and look for that goodness. As the elections approach, there's going to be pressure to show whether you're with the Republicans or with the Democrats, with probably very little in between. So let's show the country that, sure, we've got our differences. We will always have our policy differences. But we can figure out ways to work through them by working together and putting Alaska ahead of all else. And that's how we get things done. That's how we reckon with the really hard things. That's how we advance projects and create jobs and establish the quality of life that really are at the root of everything that we need and want in Alaska. And if we can do that, there is absolutely no limit to what we can achieve. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you yet again. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Senator Murkowski has agreed to take some questions. We'll begin with Representative Baker.
Mr. President, and thank you, Senator. Truly thank you for recognizing and championing Alaska's role in the Arctic. Can you please speak to the status of efforts to monitor and protect our nation's interests in the Arctic, such as the Arctic Shipping Federal Advisory Committee Act?
Well, first, let me offer my congratulations to you as the brand spankingest new member of the House of Representatives. Congratulations. It's good to have you here. So where we are in the Arctic, I mentioned we're moving forward with certain aspects of infrastructure. Having a deep water port up there is going to be critical. I mentioned icebreakers. I will share with you, I'm really disappointed right now in what the Coast Guard is projecting for our timelines on the icebreaker. We got delayed because of supply chain issues. We got delayed because of some contracting issues. And I'm not at all pleased because it's pushing us back to a place that, in my view, leaves us vulnerable. We're trying to make sure that we are able to be teed up for a commercially available icebreaker that will allow us to get a vessel up north in a shorter time period. That's included in our appropriations bills that we're going to be working on in these next matter of weeks, but that also is not guaranteed at this point in time. So we can build out the infrastructure shoreside, but we also need to have the ships. Your point about the outcome of the shipping report, we still do not have the full complement of the FACA, the advisory council members to that shipping shipping commission. It's not, they don't call it a commission, but for the entity that will move forward with that. We are, I believe, vulnerable and I'm choosing my words carefully, and I think vulnerable is probably a pretty mild term to use right now because of our lack of response in the Arctic. We have our military that are our guardians, but we don't have what we need when it comes to ensuring that shipping that comes through that Bering Strait area, that very narrow choke point between Russia, that we are in a good place. We saw earlier this year, earlier in 2003, we saw Russia moving oil through the Bering Straits, coming across in oil tankers that we question whether or not they meet the safety standards, whether it's polar code, much less double-hulled tankers. I've engaged with the Coast Guard repeatedly on this, and what we're told is, unless something bad happens, there's little that we can do as long as they stay on their side of the line. Well, that's kind of a wish and a prayer approach, a wish and a prayer that there's nothing bad that happens, that there's no accident out there. And so we need to have the full complement of that report advanced. We do have a more focused Arctic security strategy at the national level than we have ever had at any time, and that's going to help us going forward, but we need the resources that are up there. So thank you, Thomas. Representative Baker.
Thank you. Senator Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator, for all that you do for Alaska. You asked, what can we do to bring people back to Alaska? It's probably the same thing that people in Alaska want. Make Alaska more affordable to live with each and every decision that we make. I had the privilege of meeting with several members of rural Alaska with the Yukon-Kuskokwim Coalition of many organizations just yesterday. And one of their spokesmen, I know you know him well, Robert Nick, from Nunapitchuk. He said that things are, he operated a small store, as you know, in Nunapitchuk, and he's been going to Bethel, to Anchorage, and looking at the prices, and is astonished of what it cost to provide food on the table. He's listed the fact that it's hard to get marine mammals, fish, birds, meat to put on the table, and that is causing a hardship on people like him at the far ends of the food chain in Alaska. He said that it is getting so bad that he has to decide whether to pay his electrical bill, his heating bill, or buy food. So all of those are related to affordability. And I explained to him that a couple of years ago, thanks to this legislature, we increased power cost equalization from 500 to 750 kilowatts. He said that was a good thing. He also mentioned education, but one of the programs that was so successful was weatherization. The Alaska legislature spent close to $700 million on weatherization, and those dollars get people off of diesel, and it's a savings. Many of them saved $2,000 to $3,000 a year, and that's not just for 1 year. That is each and every single year. And I think weatherization programs is one of the low-hanging fruits, and it's probably the best dollar that we can spend on reducing energy costs for people of all Alaska. I'm looking at this issue, and I think that the need out there is probably close to $1 billion to weatherize homes all over the state of Alaska, and it would be a great savings to get many Alaskans off of diesel. So whatever you can do to in each and every decision that you make is make sure that you address the question, is this decision making Alaska more affordable for the citizens that we represent? Because each and every one of us knows the impacts of this cold weather that we've had in Anchorage, in Fairbanks, and all over Alaska. That has put an additional financial strain on each and every family that we have. So I would pass that on from the coalition of the Yukon-Kuskokwim area and pass this on from our friend Robert Nick. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Hoffman. And I actually had a chance to meet with Robert and the group that had traveled back to DC a few weeks back. The point about weatherization is accurate. It is that low-hanging fruit, and this is where we really can partner between the federal dollars and the state dollars in working to address that. I do think we have to recognize, though, and you've seen them, I've seen them, many of you have, there are many, many, many homes that weatherization is almost futile because the housing stock is so poor. And so weatherization may be that low-hanging fruit, but ultimately we've got to be looking at housing availability, housing affordability around our state. I'm going to have an opportunity to talk to the governor later, and this is one of the issues that I want to discuss with him because I know he has some proposals out there as well. But it's not only the housing, it is everything that goes into the cost of living in places in our state, particularly on those off-road communities in our rural areas where our transportation costs are prohibitively high. And that impacts food, that impacts everything from how much the school has available to spend on their operations. Because if you're having to spend more money to keep the school lights on and to keep things warm in a drafty building, it just means that you have less available to provide for your kids. So this is something that I work on every day, and you have challenged me this. For some of you who have not been here as long as Senator Hoffman and I, Senator Hoffman is one who I can always count on every year to challenge me on what are you doing to lower the cost of energy for the people in rural Alaska. And I never forget that challenge, and I take it to heart, because until we can make it affordable for people to remain in their communities, we will continue to have the challenges that we face. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative McCabe.
Thank you, Mr. President. Welcome, Senator. Thank you for the Valentine shout-out.
Keep working on that railroad.
Well, that's my question, actually. Right. As you probably know, we haven't built even a mile of rail since we bought the railroad in 1985. Transportation is key to infrastructure, or to resource development. Our transportation infrastructure is key to minerals, critical minerals, coal. And I'm wondering if there is any chance that there is still a BIL or maybe Federal Railroad Administration or FTA money available to complete not only Port McKenzie, but the Northern Rail extension.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you for the question, and thank you for raising it in committee and publicly. You're right. Think about our transportation systems in this state. We've got limited road system, we acknowledge that, and we've got rail that goes from Seward up to Fairbanks. That's it. And we haven't worked to really build that out. So what is available? What can we do? Actually, the railroad has been one of the beneficiaries of some of the infrastructure grants to help facilitate rail bridge crossings. That helps, but it's not an extension. It's not an extension. And whether we're talking about an extension that would take us beyond Fairbanks to I'd like to get to the border. I met with the Minister of Alberta just this past week. We were talking about different ways that Alaska and Canada can be partner, and we talked about transportation corridors. What will it take? Not only would we be able to move things both directions with our resources, but they would be able to do the same as well. And it's not just that as an extension. We've talked about an extension that would take us down to Port McKenzie. And that is something that is still under discussion. Is that the priority? I would argue that we need you is part of that answer.
Thank you. Senator Hughes.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Senator Murkowski, for the update and the work that you do on behalf of Alaska. And before I go into the subject matter I want to ask you about, I just want to encourage you to consider acquiring a seasonal pass to Ski Talk in Mat-Su.
I'm going out to visit very shortly. I think it's in March.
Okay.
I'm actually not going to visit. I'm going to ski.
Okay, excellent, excellent. So I want to talk to you about agriculture, because we talk about big things in the state: fisheries, oil and gas development, our critical minerals, those things. And agriculture has really been a bit of a small thing in this state, but there is tremendous potential and there's tremendous momentum in this building. And I know it makes you happy to know when we work together. And I will say this has become a very bicameral, all four caucuses across the legislative and executive branch, because, and the public is tremendously supportive of increasing our food security and independence. And I understand, and I haven't read it yet, but understand you have in your approving the Arctic Act, there's something pertaining to agriculture. And so I'm eager to work with your office on that. But one of the things, the Farm Bill, because it's a political bill, it's a political year, probably not going to be passed. But I would ask that you and the rest of our federal delegation, in a new kind of way, in a visionary kind of way, really engage and not just leave it to the senators and House of Reps from Iowa, Nebraska, and those kind of farm states, but realize we have the potential to have more farmable acres in Alaska than any other place in the country. And our seasons are lengthening, our soils are warming. So and we've got up at UAF, the research they're coming up with. There's now a new oil seed called camelina that has tremendous potential. The amount that came off of 1 acre is more than what's coming off of acres where it's commercialized in the lower 48. So there are a lot of great things happening, a lot of interest, a lot of momentum. So I just request that you pay more attention in a visionary kind of way. And one specific thing I would like in the Farm Bill is to get the hemp matter settled, because we thought we were going forward on that and we're hesitating. That is a multi-billion-dollar industry in the northern parts of China and Canada. So there's real potential in our state for it. But until it gets fixed at the federal level, as an example, our ag research at the university cannot touch it. So for multiple reasons, and for farmers wanting to use it to feed it now to livestock, I just ask that with that Farm Bill that there's some Alaska eyes really fall on that and help agriculture in our state, as it's a growing potential. Thank you.
Representative Hughes, thank you for your leadership on this, and for all of you that are engaged in these matters of agriculture. You are so correct in terms of the growing level of interest and all the good reasons why that interest should be elevated. So a little bit of update on the Farm Bill. I really thought that we were going to see good, strong momentum early last year. Things were progressing really very well. But as things go in Washington, they go really well until they go really dark. And we're kind of in the really dark phase right now. It's basically an argument over some of the nutritional benefits, as well as some of the farm support provisions. And so, to their credit, Senator Stabenow, the chairman, and Senator Bozeman, the ranking, have been working diligently to try to advance this. I remain optimistic, actually, that we might see passage of the Farm Bill yet this year, only because Senator Stabenow is retiring from the Senate after 20 some odd years. And I think there's going to be an effort to try to advance this last farm bill under her watch. But it's still in the complicated stage. To your point about Alaska being in the mix of things, I have not supported the farm bills previously. And I haven't because I looked at them and I said, you know, this is a lot of federal support for people to not grow things. And that's Lisa Murkowski's very simplistic summation of what I saw in the farm bill that was objectionable. There were a lot of good things in the farm bill, but for other reasons, including the farm supports, I always deferred. And the last time that we had a farm bill, we had been engaged, that was when we had stood up the microgrants for food security, because what I was hearing from Alaska's farmers were, we are not agribusiness, we are not big ag. We are smaller farm operators. We are out in the valley, we are out in Delta, we're in Wrangell. We are smaller farmers, and we are just not seeing how these programs fit for us. Or how can I, as the nonprofit, start a little community garden? And so we started working on that. So we've got to engage. And that was the attitude that I took, and I think Senator Sullivan took as well with this round of Farm Bill. I said, you know what? I'm talking to people about different ways that we can participate, and whether this is supporting our smaller farmers with access to loans at a smaller level, whether this is trying to encourage livestock in Alaska that might not necessarily be the same as you have in the lower 48, like reindeer herders. I go out to Mukoriak, and they've got a little tiny reindeer processing facility. Mukoriak is not easy to get to. Your USDA inspector is not going to go out and sign off on this. So how can we be creative? Let's use 638 contracting examples to have our tribes be trained through USDA to be their own inspectors so that we can facilitate this type of a small little economy on a little remote island that might just be able to help. So we're thinking about some things like this. But it's one thing for us to think about it. It's another thing to actually get that support in there. So I brought Senator Bozeman up to Alaska this summer. He was doing his national ag tour. And so I sat down with him. I'm like, so I know that you've been to Alaska, but you need to come to Alaska and look at Alaska through the eyes of our potential for feeding Alaskans and beyond. And I said, it's gonna be different. And so he was willing, and we took him out to the valley, and you know what he heard that just blew his mind was when some of the farm operators out there were saying, it cost me more to ship this tractor to Alaska than it did for me to buy the tractor. And he's like, well, how do you guys do this? And then we took him out to Kodiak. We showed him a small farm on Uzinki, which was pretty small scale. But then we took him out to the kelp operation there. I tried to get him to eat some of the kelp, and he wouldn't go for it. But he saw how Alaska could fit into this. Dan was there. We had so much fun just kind of showing him the eyes of agriculture on a different level and what that meant. And so we just like this past week, had yet another follow-on meeting about some of these measures that we're working on that would go into this big, huge farm bill that would be more scaled to address us in Alaska. So I'd love to work with you on that and share with you the headway that we're making. But it does require that vision, and you all have really helped step that out, and I credit the governor as well for what he's trying to do to make more lands available for farming and for agriculture. We've got so much potential.
Thank you. Representative Dybert.
Good morning,
Good
Senator.
morning.
Murkowski, always great to see you.
Good to see
Thank you for presenting to us today, and thank you for your tireless work for Alaska and all Alaskans.
Thank you.
So this session, we've had really great presentations on the Arctic, thanks to my colleague from District 40 in the Special Committee of Arctic Policy, Economic Development and Tourism, long name. So in thinking and reflecting on our presentations, one of the things you're well known for is your work in the Arctic sphere. And is there an update you can provide to us on where Alaska stands in 2024 when it comes to the Arctic and our international relationships? Thank you.
I am an active participant in many of the international forums on the Arctic. I've been a member of the Standing Committee on Arctic Parliamentarians for 15 some odd years. So I work at the parliamentarian level, and I participate at many of the national forums. And I think it's important to be able to share with you that the United States is now being recognized, and Alaska being more recognized for stepping into its role as an Arctic leader, because for so many years, in fairness, the United States was absent. We were there, but we didn't have a lot to show. We didn't have the policies in place, and we definitely didn't have the personnel in place. And this is where we have really, really moved that ball forward. So on the policy side, you've heard me mention some of the initiatives that we put in place. Standing up the Ted Stevens Center for Arctic Security Studies, what we're doing with the Arctic Security, Arctic Center for Excellence. These are things that are happening here. We've also done a very good job, I believe, on the defense side in pushing the Department of Defense for updated Arctic strategies. So each branch has now presented, and there has been a broader national strategy for the Arctic. But it's more than just defense. It is the economic activity, it is the people that live and work and raise their families in the Arctic. And so how are they being represented in many of these policies? So one area that I wish that I was able to share that I'm satisfied that we're there is in the naming of an Arctic ambassador. Because when you go to these forums and everybody else is putting their person with a title there, and we have a special representative for the Arctic that really has no presence, no connection really. They're just somebody from the State Department that's been on assignment here. That doesn't lend the gravitas that we need. And so getting Dr. Sfraga through that process is one that is super important, and hopefully we're going to be able to advance on that. We've been working hard on the appropriation side to make sure that resources are significant. I mentioned the icebreakers, I mentioned Port of Nome. We're working with the Alaska Marine Exchange on a ship tracking program through the Arctic there. I do think that we are seeing a level of increased interest in the Arctic, not only with this administration and their very keen focus on climate change, but because of China and because of Russia. And whether we like it or not, we have to pay attention. We know, because we see the reports of the scrambles off the coast of the Seward Peninsula there, when the Russian bear bombers come a little closer than any of us want them to be. We got on everybody's radar screen, literally, when the unidentified flying phenomenon, or UAPs, the balloons, the spy balloons, crossed over. And the interesting observation from many saying, wow, didn't know Alaska and Russia were so close. It's like, welcome to our world. We're always having to look over our shoulder here. So incidents like that have caused, I think, a growing level of interest in the Arctic and an appreciation of the vulnerabilities. So there is more work that we need to do, but I think for the first time in a long time, we are recognized at a higher level than we have been previously. My colleague, Senator Sullivan, is, I believe, today at the Munich Security Conference, an annual event, and they have had a focus on Arctic in that security conference for some years now. And believe me, Alaska gets profiled in that role, very importantly.
Thanks so much, Senator. I promised your staff to get you out of here by 11:10. It's 11:12. I have to apologize to the representatives who couldn't get to, Representative Stutes, Sumner, Prax, Fields, and also staff. I was looking forward to asking Representative Stutes to be brief, but apparently we don't have time. But thank you so much, Senator.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you. Madam Majority Leader Giesel.
Mr. President, I move adjournment of the joint session.
Thank you. Without objection, the joint session is adjourned.
The House will stand at ease to allow the senators to return to their chambers.